Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the relationship between Western politicians, and I could use probably any Western country, but I'll use Britain as an example here, and a bit from Australia as well, but where Western politicians insist that they're going to reduce immigration. It's what the people want. The voters want us to reduce immigration, and that's what we pledge to reduce immigration. And in fact, they do nothing of the sort. In fact, they do the exact opposite. Now, today, most of us know that the mass migration is baked in to the globalist project, and the globalists control all the Western governments. So we know that whatever the politicians tell us, they're going to do what the globalists tell them to do, and the globalists are telling them to keep the mass migration going. In fact, to increase it. They want to be whites in a minority in most white countries, certainly the English-speaking countries. They want white people to be in a minority in those countries now, over the next few years, and that requires whatever level of mass immigration that is needed to do that. But let's go back to, and I'm going to sort of again use Britain as the primary example, but really, other than the odd year when you may get a small increase in net migration, as it's called, you'd be hard pressed to find more than a couple of years. I mean, here's 1991 in Britain, for example. The net migration was 40,000. Now, back in those days, that was, there would have been a higher proportion of skilled migrants in that group than peasants. Today it's primarily peasants, but back then it wasn't. So, not that there weren't peasants in the mix, there were, but there was also a lot of the proverbial doctors and engineers. Now it went up, started to go up in really the second prime ministership of John Major. That's when it started to, the immigration started to, the net migration started to increase. Now, some of that was due to a reduction in the amount of people that were leaving the UK. Now, there was a very high a number of people leaving the UK and going to Canada, Australia, or the United States and New Zealand or whatever. So the immigration is very high. And just by the way, back in those days, looking at the, if you look at the ship manifests of people that were emigrating to, say, from England to well, anywhere, but for example, Australia, there wasn't this sort of peasant thing that we see today. The people who were emigrating were carpenters, architects, nurses, electricians, plumbers, and accountants, and so on. So there was a very high proportion of skilled people, either professionally skilled or in trades, professionally skilled as in, say, an architect, or trades as in, for example, a carpenter, nurses and that sort of thing. So there was actually a very small number, there was quite a small number of unskilled people. There was, on a relative basis, a large proportion of skilled people. Most of them were youngish with young children as well, of school age. So this was a very, you just don't see that today. If I look at the sort of people coming to Australia today, then you're lucky to find anyone who A, speaks English, and B, has even a high school education. And there's a vast number of, as there is in the UK today, vast number of peasants coming with no credentials, IQ 80, no education, and so on. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. It's just the globalist requirement to dilute the number of white people in what were hitherto white countries. But coming back to Prime Minister John Major, it's starting to pick up there. Now, John Major starts talking about towards the last couple of years or so of his prime ministership, he's starting to say because there's now a net increase in migrants, which of say 3 years in a row, averaging like 60,000 a year. And again, some of this is because there's a fewer number of migrants that are a few number of people leaving, and that's because places like Australia and Canada and the US are starting to increase the requirements for, if you want to emigrate, you've got to have 2 degrees instead of 1 or something. They've got a higher criteria, a higher bar to meet. So John Major's publicity machine saying, well, we're going to reduce immigration, don't worry. So because a lot of the Indians and Pakistanis and all these sort of people, they're not going back anymore, they're staying. And so that's causing some concern. Now, as soon as Tony Blair becomes Prime Minister, that's when the floodgates open. Again, some of this is because there's a reduction in the amount of people leaving, but nonetheless. So from Tony Blair's first year in office, the migration increases by nearly threefold. Immigrants coming into the United Kingdom. So there's a sharp increase there when he's a globalist flunky. So he's doing what the globalists tell him, do this, and he's doing it. So the numbers jump quite quickly. So and they stay at an average. So they're sort of a little bit under 200,000 a year. Now, in 2004, they just really jump. So now the numbers, instead of averaging like 190,000 or so for the previous few years, now they're averaging 270,000. The numbers of people leaving are starting to increase, but the numbers of migrants coming in just go through the roof. So they're now, in fact, 270,000 is the net migration is the average. Slightly drops during the 2008 financial crisis, not much. Quickly ramps up again in 2010. Now, when the Conservative parties come in, David Cameron, and he pledges, again, Tony Blair, by the way, Gordon Brown, all these prime ministers, they're all pledging to substantially reduce immigration. At the same time, they're really ramping it up, really ramping it up. So now, again, exacerbating this is the amount of people leaving the UK is declining. And this is mainly people like India and Pakistan. They're not going back anymore. They're staying in England. So now the average drops slightly when the Conservatives come in, not much. Like it goes from, say, 250,000 to 210,000 as a net migration figure. But by 2014, it's going hysterical. It's now 300 to 350,000 net migration coming in. That doesn't even include illegals and those sort of arrivals. So this is now, if we look at why did Boris Johnson get such a massive majority when he became Prime Minister and went to the election, and there was Brexit. And the reason Brexit happened is because the British people wanted a stop to the mass migration. They didn't want it. The politicians knew they didn't want it, and the politicians kept saying, yep, we'll reduce migration. We'll give you what you want. But as soon as they're in office, remember, their instructions come from the globalists. They don't come from the voters. The voters can get fucked as far as Western politicians are concerned. Their bosses, their masters, their controllers, their handlers are the globalists. And they say, we want more immigration. We want white people to be a minority in their own country. You will do that. And so they dutifully, and Boris is just, fuck. Talk about on his knees, groveling and gobbling to the globalists. It was disgusting to watch. Whether it be the COVID, the Green New Deal, or the immigration, he just rolled over and became a complete globalist puppet. Now he was given a major majority, a big majority, because people saw him as an outsider who would tell the globalists to get lost and reduce immigration. Now. If Britain has same as Australia, if Britain has an immigration policy of only needed skills, highly qualified skills, the nuclear scientist type level of skills, they could probably get by. In fact, easily get by with 10 to 15,000 a year maximum. They wouldn't need any more than that. In Australia, it's even less. Probably 5,000 a year would do it, if they even 5,000 being generous. So the amount of skills, if we just focus on skills needed, so it just goes to show you how insane the immigration policy is. Here in Australia, they want to bring in 250,000 people every year, and that's before you have things like family reunions and where these peasants bring out their whole village from some third world shithole and that sort of thing. It's absolutely insane. None of these people have skills. They can only get jobs through the affirmative action system. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get jobs. They had to compete in the open market. So all these people arriving that bring and deliver nothing, all they do is dilute the white population, which is the primary key focus of the globalist project and why they want the mass migration. So there are some side benefits. More consumers, more workers, depressed wages, consume more goods, that sort of thing. And everyone who comes has to consume some sort of accommodation. They have to consume electricity. They have to consume food and so on. So in that sense, all those things are controlled directly or indirectly by the globalist cabal anyway. So they bring out more consumers for their own goods and services, banking services as an example. So, but the one thing that is apparent all across the Western world is the politicians know full well the populace and the voters do not want mass immigration. They don't want immigration at all unless it's absolutely needed for shortage of skills, and that the people speak English, they have those skills, the nuclear scientist, and those skills are needed in the economy. Then no one's got any problem with it. I think everyone's fine with that. It's the mass immigration of illiterate fucking peasants which is driving everyone crazy all across the West, and that's the globalist shtick. But it's interesting to see just how duplicitous the British governments or British politicians, the body politic has been, and the globalists control both parties. If the Conservatives get absolutely wiped out of the next election, the globalists don't care, because then Labor comes in and the globalists control Labor. So either way, the globalists are going to get exactly what they want. So it doesn't affect them. They're still going to get their mass migration. They're still going to get the Green New Deal and all that sort of shit that the globalists are pushing. But it's just the extent of the duplicity of the lies that are constantly told. We're going to reduce immigration, and they're saying these things knowing that they're going to increase it, not decrease it or limit it or control it. And that's an outrage. The people can't punish the body politic anymore through the ballot box, because the globalists control all the major parties, and that's how the globalists want it. You've been a tacit about your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.